My name is Quinn Sorensen. I'm 31 years old, and I'm a forensic accountant. At exactly 6:14 on the morning of February 19th, my doorbell camera recorded my husband's two adult children backing a U-Haul into my driveway, unloading my 76-year-old father-in-law into a wheelchair on the icy front walk, and driving off before the brake lights even cooled. It was 9 degrees outside. He had a hospital bracelet still on his wrist and a garbage bag of clothes in his lap. My stepdaughter texted me at 6:31. Grandpa Walt is with you guys now. We're done, don't make this a thing. They didn't know I'd spent 11 years tracing money for a living. They didn't know that 2 months earlier, I'd already pulled his bank records on a hunch. And they really didn't know that the thing they'd just done in front of a camera was the missing piece I'd been waiting for. If you're still here, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments what state you're watching from. Because what these people did to a sick old man is the kind of thing that needs witnesses.
Let me take you back. Because the morning they dropped him off was the end of something, not the beginning.
I married into this family 3 years ago. My husband, Dean, is a kind, soft-spoken man who teaches high school chemistry and who, I would learn, had spent his whole life apologizing for his older brother. Dean's father, Walt, to me, Dad, if I'm being honest about how I came to feel about him, moved up from Tucson to be near family after his wife passed. He had a little money. Not a lot. $61,000 from the sale of the Arizona house, plus Social Security and a small pension from 31 years as a union electrician. He was 70 when he came north, sharp as a tack. Did the crossword in pen. Beat me at gin rummy so badly, I stopped keeping score. He didn't move in with us, though. He moved in with Dean's brother, Royce, and Royce's wife, Tabitha, and their 2 grown kids, who still lived at home rent-free. Royce had the bigger house and made the bigger speech about family taking care of family. At the time it sounded generous. I know now it was a calculation. Walt came with $61,000 and a pension, and Royce came with a mortgage he couldn't quite cover. For about a year it was fine. Then it wasn't. The first thing I noticed was Thanksgiving, 14 months before the U-Haul. Walt had lost weight, his shirt collar gapped. When I hugged him, I could feel the knobs of his spine through the cardigan, and his hands shook reaching for the gravy in a way they hadn't the year before. I asked Tabitha lightly if he'd seen his doctor. She said, "He's just old, Quinn. Stop diagnosing everybody." Walt laughed it off, but later, drying dishes next to me at the sink, he said something quiet that stuck in my throat for a year. He said, "I try not to eat too much over here, don't want to be a bother." A 72-year-old man, rationing himself in his own son's house so he wouldn't cost too much. I should have done something then. I didn't, because I didn't have proof, and I am a person who needs proof. The thing about being a forensic accountant is you learn that abuse leaves a paper trail before it leaves a bruise. People who steal from the old don't start with the violence. They start with a withdrawal, a loan. A signature on a form the victim doesn't fully read. By the time anyone sees a body decline, the money's already been gone for years. That Christmas, I helped Walt set up the banking app on his phone, the way you'd help any older relative, just so he could check his balance without driving to the branch. I thought I was giving him independence. 6 weeks later, he called me, confused, his voice small. "Quinn, sweetheart, there's money leaving my account I don't recognize. Can you look at it for me? I don't want to bother Royce about it." He sent me screenshots, and the second I saw them my stomach dropped, because I'd seen this exact pattern in court a dozen times. Recurring transfers, $1,100, the same day every month, to R. Sorensen. That was Royce. When I asked Walt if he'd agreed to give Royce money every month, there was a long pause on the line. "I might have," he said. "Royce handles my accounts now. He says it's for my share of the household, but I don't remember signing anything that big." That night I opened a folder on my work laptop and named it nothing. Just a date. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was not being paranoid. The morning of the U-Haul, Dean was already gone to a faculty meeting when the camera alert hit my phone. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the thumbnail. Royce's son lowering a wheelchair down the ramp like he was returning a rental. And I was down the stairs in my socks, throwing the door open into the cold. Walt was sitting in that chair on my front walk, the wheels half locked in the ice, no coat, just a thin pajama top and that hospital bracelet. His lips were a color lips should not be. I got down in front of him, and his eyes were wet and ashamed, not angry, ashamed. And he said, "I'm sorry to land on you like this, honey, I know it's a lot." That's the moment I stopped being his daughter-in-law and started being his advocate. They'd trained a grown man to apologize for being left in the snow. I went into the version of myself I am when everything is on fire and somebody has to be calm. I got him inside, got him in front of the space heater, wrapped him in the throw off the couch and then a comforter on top of that. I texted Dean, one line, "Come home now, your dad's here, it's bad." Then I started doing what I actually know how to do. I read the hospital bracelet. He'd been admitted 3 days earlier. Royce and Tabitha had taken him in, apparently, for dizziness and a fall, and then signed him out against medical advice that very morning and driven him straight to my porch. I'd later get the records. The discharge note from the attending said the patient was malnourished, mildly hypothermic on arrival, and showed 2 stage 2 pressure ulcers on his lower back consistent with prolonged time in a bed or chair without repositioning. The attending had flagged it. Somebody at that hospital's had all started asking questions, which is exactly why Royce yanked him out AMA. He wasn't bringing Walt to family. He was getting Walt away from the people who were about to make a report. I took his temperature with the kitchen thermometer because I didn't have anything better. 95.1. I checked his hands and feet for frostbite, found the early white patches, and warmed them slowly the way you're supposed to, not all at once. And while I worked, I started photographing. The bracelet, the garbage bag of clothes, which when I opened it, held no medications, no shoes, one slipper. The pressure sores when he let me look, with his permission, because he was a grown man and I asked. I shot the doorbell footage and saved it to 3 places before I did anything else, because I have watched too many cases collapse because the one piece of real evidence got accidentally deleted. In the garbage bag, at the very bottom, I found a folded sheet of lined paper in Tabitha's handwriting, a budget, what Walt costs us, groceries, an estimate, utilities, his share, wear and tear on the house, and at the bottom, underlined twice, honestly not worth it. That sentence is going to live in my head until I die. Dean got home 20 minutes later, and the look on his face when he saw his father shivering under 2 blankets is something I won't describe because it's his, not mine. He wanted to drive straight to Royce's. I put my hand flat on his chest and said the same thing I say to clients who want to confront the person who robbed them. Not yet. We document first, we act second. If you yell at him today, he cleans everything up by tomorrow. The phone calls started around 10. Tabitha first. I let it go to voicemail twice, then I picked up, put it on speaker, and pressed records on a second phone, because we're in a one-party consent state, and I am one of the parties. Oh good, you got and chirpy, like she'd dropped off a casserole. We just couldn't anymore, Quinn, you have no idea. Royce's blood pressure, the kids, it's a full house. And honestly, you two have the space, and you don't have children. So, you took a man out of the hospital against doctor's orders and left him on my porch in 9-degree weather, I said. The chirp dropped half an octave. Don't be dramatic. He's fine. He's tougher than he looks. His core temp was 95. There were sores on his back. Bed sores are nobody's fault, she said, and I will remember the speed of that answer for the rest of my life, because nobody who hasn't thought about bed sores says bed sores are nobody's fault in under a second. He just sits all day, he won't move. The call went 40-some minutes. I let her talk. People who are lying always over-explain, and every sentence she gave me was a sentence I could check later against a record. Did Walt agree to move out? He understands it's for the best. That's not what I asked. Did he agree? He's fine with whatever the family decides. I screenshotted the transcript of the recording afterward and labeled the file by date and length. 43 minutes and 19 seconds. Then the texts came, and they were so much worse, because people will type things they'd never say to your face. Royce wrote, "We did our years. It's your turn now." Tabitha wrote, "You married into this family. Time to contribute." Their son, the one who'd wheeled his grandfather onto the ice, wrote, "And I want you to sit with this. Lol, he's basically furniture at this point, just put him somewhere." I saved every message. Then I did the thing I'd been avoiding for 14 months. I went back into the bank records. Here's where being good at my job stopped being a personality trait and started being a weapon. Walt gave me written permission to pull everything. 18 months of statements, which is the window I could get fast. I sat at the dining table that first night after Dean finally fell asleep on the couch next to his dad, and I built a timeline the way I'd build one for a federal case, because that's the only way I know how. The $1,100 a month transfers to Royce were the obvious thing. 16 of them. $7,600 over the window, labeled household share. Fine. Suspicious but arguably defensible if you squint. That's the bait. The professionals know the obvious theft is never the real theft, so I kept reading. There was a recurring charge, $340 a month to a company called Sunrise Medical Supply LLC Home Health Supplies. Reasonable on its face for an elderly diabetic, except Walt isn't diabetic, and I'd never once seen a single piece of medical equipment in his room at Royce's beyond a cane he bought himself at the drugstore. I called the company. The woman on the line was confused. They had no account under Walt's name, his address, or his phone. I read her the routing detail off the statement. There was a long pause and then, "Ma'am, that's not us. That account info routes to a personal Cash App tag, not a business." Somebody had set up a fake medical supply payee that was actually just a money funnel into a phone. $4,100 over the window, gone to a vendor that didn't exist. Then I found the big one, and I had to get up and walk around the kitchen before I could look at it again. September. A single withdrawal. $19,000. The memo, typed by whoever set it up, said, W. Sorensen, gift to family. Investment. I pulled the authorization form which Royce had helpfully scanned and emailed to the bank, because criminals love a paper trail right up until it convicts them. I put Walt's real signature from an old check next to the signature on that form. I have testified about handwriting enough times to know what I was looking at. The real one was tight, slanted, the W made in one confident stroke. The one on the form was shaky, broken, drawn slowly by someone tracing, and whoever forged it had spelled the last name Sorensen. No second E. They stole $19,000 from the man and couldn't even spell his name. I showed Walt the $19,000 form in the morning, gently, with coffee, after he'd slept and eaten a real breakfast. Eggs, toast, a banana, and watching him eat that breakfast like it was the first full meal he'd had in months is its own kind of evidence. He stared at the form a long time. "I never signed this," he said. "I've never seen this in my life." Then quieter, "Is that supposed to be my name? That's not even my name." I want to tell you about the power of attorney, because it's the part that turned this from a sad family story into a felony. Folded into the bottom of that garbage bag, under the one slipper, was a durable power of attorney naming Royce as Walt's agent over all financial and medical decisions. Dated the previous spring. Same shaky, trace signature, same missing E. Walt looked at it, and his hands started shaking worse than the Parkinson's-adjacent tremor he'd developed, and he said, I would never sign my whole life over to him. I'm not, Quinn, I'm not gone yet. And he wasn't. That was the thing. 3 days of real food and proper rest, and the man was doing the crossword again in pen, telling me the 7-letter word for deceive was defraud and laughing at his own joke. They'd been treating a competent man like he was already gone so they could spend his money before he noticed. On day 3, I called his actual doctor, the one in Tucson he'd never officially transferred from, and then the primary care office Royce had supposedly set him up with locally. The local office had a chart for him. It showed exactly 2 visits in 18 months and 4 cancellations, every cancellation logged as patient declined to come in, per family. Walt, who had never missed a doctor's appointment in his life, who used to drive 90 minutes for a dental cleaning, was on record as a man who kept refusing care. They weren't just stealing his money. They were building a file that made him look incapable and uncooperative, so that when the decline they were causing finally showed, it would look like nature instead of neglect. I added it all up. He came north with $61,000 2 years ago. The account had $8,000 left. Some of that gap was real, rent he genuinely owed, real groceries, real life. But I could document, with statements and signatures and a phone call to a fake company, at least $31,000 that was straight theft. 17,600 in inflated household share. 4,100 to a vendor that didn't exist. 19,000 on a forged authorization. And that was just the window I could pull in one night. God knows what the first 6 months held. Now here's where I did the thing the comments on stories like this always beg people to do, and the thing my own training screamed at me to do, and I want to be specific because somebody watching this is going to be standing where I stood. I called 911 first, not to report a crime in progress, but to start the record. The dispatcher connected me to a non-emergency line, and I made a formal report of suspected elder abuse and abandonment, gave them the discharge AMA timeline, the temperature, the photos, and got an incident number. That incident number is the spine of everything that came after, because now there was a timestamp the family could never argue with. Then I called Adult Protective Services and filed a separate report because APS and the police run different tracks and you want both. The APS intake worker spent 51 minutes on the phone with me. I gave her the financial timeline, the medical timeline, the forged documents, the budget that said, honestly not worth it, the text that called a human being furniture. At the end she was quiet for a second and then she said, Ems, Sorensen, with the financial exploitation and the forged power of attorney, this isn't only our case. This is going to the DA. Don't tell the family a report's been filed. It can compromise the investigation. She gave me a case number. I wrote it on the inside cover of the folder I'd named with a date and nothing else. The investigator came 4 days later. She interviewed Walt for 2 hours with me in the room as support but silent, the way you're supposed to be. She photographed the healing pressure sores. She took the originals of the forged forms in an evidence sleeve and held the POA up to the window and said, almost to herself, this is traced. You can see the pen stops where they lifted. She looked at me and said, how did you get all of this organized? And I said, it's my job, and she said, it shouldn't have to be. A geriatric specialist did a formal capacity evaluation a week after that, because the whole fraud depended on Walt being incompetent, and the evaluation came back that he scored a 29 out of 30, fully capable of managing his own affairs, and that any document signed without his knowing participation was void. The doctor's report used the phrase, deliberate medical and nutritional deprivation, inconsistent with the patient's documented baseline. In plain English, he was fine when he got here, they made him sick, and they did it on Sorosumtsitsu easier to take. While the investigation moved, the family did what guilty people do. They escalated. Royce called Dean. Not me, Dean, because he thought his little brother was still the soft one he could steamroll. He said we were tearing the family apart. He said Walt was confused, and we were poisoning him against his real son. He said, and Dean told me this with his jaw so tight I thought it would crack, Dad's going to die eventually, and when he does, you two get nothing. So think hard about whether this fight is worth it. Dean wrote it all down within the hour because I asked him to. Threatening someone over an inheritance, in writing, is a gift. 2 weeks in, on a Sunday, they showed up at my house. Royce and Tabitha on the porch, Royce holding a folder of his own, like he was the one with the evidence. I didn't open the door. I turned on the camera audio and the second phone, and then I cracked the door with the chain on. We need to discuss Dad's estate, Royce said. No hello, like he was opening a meeting. There's nothing to discuss. You're named in an APS finding and a police report. His face did a thing I've only seen in deposition rooms the moment a person realizes the floor isn't where they thought it was. You called the cops on your own family? I reported elder abuse. The state agreed with me. Tabitha started crying, the loud kind that's meant to be heard by neighbors. We gave him a home. We did everything. You gave him bed sores and a forged power of attorney with his name spelled wrong, I said. You billed him $340 a month for a medical supply company that doesn't exist. I have the phone call where they told me the money goes to a Cash App. Royce changed tactics so fast it was almost impressive. He pulled out a checkbook, an actual checkbook, on my porch. "How much?" he said. "Whatever you think the number is, we'll make it right, and we put this behind us, and that." The checkbook, in the cold, while a recording ran, is the moment I knew we'd already won, because a man who offers to pay back the money is a man who knows exactly how much he stole. "This isn't about a number," I said. "Everything's about a number," he said, and for once in his life he told the truth. I closed the door. Tabitha cried on my porch for 19 minutes. I know because the camera stamps it. Royce dragged her to the car, and they left, and they'd just handed me 19 more minutes of footage and a checkbook offer that the DA's office found very, very interesting. The nephew called that night, the furniture one, screaming that I'd ruined his dad's life, that the cops had come to the house, that this was all my fault for making it a thing. He told me Walt had free rent and free food, and didn't appreciate it. I let him talk himself out, and then I said, he paid $1,100 a month in rent he didn't owe, and $340 a month to a company you invented. Nothing about him was free. You were the one living there for free. The line went dead. I saved the recording. 11 minutes of a man confessing the motive without ever realizing that's what he was doing. Here's the part the family never saw coming, and it's the part I think about when people ask if I did it for the money, because I want to be very clear that I did not. Walt had a will, an old one, from years back, that Royce assumed had been quietly replaced by the forged POA. That's why they were comfortable draining the accounts. They figured the will didn't matter because they controlled the man. But the will was never changed, because they never managed to get Walt in front of a lawyer who'd help them, and I found the emails proving they'd tried. Royce had contacted 3 different estate attorneys over 2 years, asking how to get his father's will and his accounts consolidated under family management. 2 of them, to their credit, told him no. That's why they went the forgery route. They couldn't do it legally, so they faked it. And the will, the real one, left the bulk of Walt's estate to Dean, and to me with a line in it Walt had dictated years before any of this, that read, "To my son Dean and his wife, who I trust to do what is right." Royce got a token amount. He'd spent 2 years stealing from a man who'd already decided not to leave him much, because Walt, it turned out, had seen who his older son was a long time before I did. When the lawyer told me what was in the will, I said no. Walt was right there at the table, doing the crossword, and I said it to him directly. "I don't want it. None of this was about money. I want it to be yours, and whatever's left when you're gone, you decide." We set up an irrevocable trust for his care, with me as trustee, and not a beneficiary. His 8 remaining thousand plus the funds we'd recover, used only for his housing and and whatever made his life good, and he chose, on his own, that anything left at the end goes to a legal aid fund for elder fraud victims who can't afford a forensic accountant of their own. Royce, Tabitha, and both kids were barred by the court from ever touching a cent of it. The DA filed charges 4 months later. Royce was charged with felony financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, identity-related forgery on the power of attorney, and criminal mistreatment. Tabitha was charged as a co-conspirator on the financial counts. They both pleaded out, rather than face a jury that would have heard the honestly not worth it. Budget read illicit aloud. Royce took 18 months and 3 years of probation. Tabitha took probation and a felony on her record that follows her into every job application for the rest of her life. The court ordered full restitution. Every dollar I'd documented, $31,000 and change, plus the inflated rent, paid back to the trust with the threat of more jail time if they missed a payment. They had to sell the bigger house with the bigger speech to make the first installment. The nephew wasn't charged. He was over 18 and on the texts but not the accounts. But the texts got read into the record anyway, and a kid who called his grandfather furniture got to live with a courtroom hearing him do it. People in the comments I'd always ask about the pension and the Social Security. So let me close that loop, because it matters. Once the forged POA was voided, his Social Security and his electrician's pension routed back to an account only he and I, as trustee, could see. The man who'd been rationing his own dinner now had every dollar he'd earned in 31 years of pulling wire through ceilings, and not one person in his bloodline could reach it. Walt lives with us now. He has the first-floor room with the window over the backyard, and last spring he and Dean built a raised garden bed at wheelchair height. He's not in the chair most days anymore, but on the bad days he is, and the bed is built, so he can still get his hands in the dirt. He gained back the weight. His doctor, a real one now with real appointments he never misses, says his blood work looks like a man 10 years younger than the file from last year. He does the crossword in pen at the kitchen table every morning, and he is, I swear to you, undefeated at gin rummy. On the 1-year anniversary of the U-Haul, at 6:14 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a doorbell alert, and my whole body went cold before I even looked. It was just a delivery, a package on the porch in the dark, watercolor pencils, the good ones, that Walt had ordered for himself, because he started painting at the senior center on Tuesdays, and he sold his first one. A crooked little birdhouse, for $40 at the spring fair, and called me at work to tell me, so proud his voice cracked. Royce sent a card last Christmas. No apology in it, just a request to talk as family. I didn't open it. I wrote return to sender and walked it to the mailbox, and on the way back inside Walt asked who it was from, and when I told him he was quiet for a second, and then he said, they wanted me when I was a checkbook. They don't want me now that I'm just a person. Then he asked if I'd seen his glasses, because the crossword wasn't going to do itself, and that was the end of it. They thought he was furniture you could leave in the cold. They didn't know he raised one good son, and that the good son married a woman who reads bank statements for a living. He was never the burden. The burden was their cruelty, and I am done carrying anything that belongs to them. Walt is 77 now. He likes watercolors, and bad puns, and beating me at cards, and he is, in every way that the law and the heart can mean it, home.